The show started off with a conversation with Lieven Patel, who's the artistic director of the Sydney Festival. His village, where he lives in Belgium, is just next door to a war cemetery, and in that war cemetery is the grave of Rufus Rigney, an Aboriginal soldier who died in World War I. And he was telling me the story, and we were talking about some of the cultural obligations and how that works, and it kind of came from there. Lieven was very interested in what this story means and this connection between Europe and Australia, and coming up to the centenary of World War I. How an Indigenous story could be the first story to be told there.
We focus on just this riser. Make sense?
One of the wonderful things during the rehearsal process is that different actors were discovering or re-articulating their connection to World War I. So one particular actor, Guy Simon, looked at this list of names and went, "Oh, that's the same last name as me. Oh, that's from the same town as my family come from." And we went back and we were looking at this photograph. We've been looking at it for several months, and that photograph was his great-grandfather. And so there's wonderful stories of things opening up. Uncle George Bostock, who's the older man who went to Vietnam and has the medals in that final image, he can talk about his relatives that were in the Light Horse. In World War I, Eli Wadigo, who's one of the actors, can talk about 5 generations of service in the armed forces, going way back to even before World War I, to the Boer War. And so there's this kind of wonderful sense of oral traditions and history that are quite vibrant. It's already there, but they're reconnecting with it as young people. It's fantastic to watch.
Munition case. No. Mortar? Nope.
I'd put a lot of stock in World War II as the beginning of the kind of civil rights movement in this country. The rights that were experienced by Indigenous servicemen in World War II led to a whole range of things that got us to the 67 referendum in my mind. So I had really neglected World War I as a storytelling font, if you like. It was deferred, I think, until World War II.
There's only so many progressive battles you can fight at once, isn't there? And that was kind of the issue, is that a lot of the energy that might have gone into a civil rights movement in the 1920s instead went into still fighting for the vote in some cases, still fighting for labour disputes and so on. Yeah, we felt that was it was interesting because on one level the Indigenous experience in the First World War was one of consciousness raising. A large group of young men who are otherwise provincial and had been deliberately kept to a certain extent in the back blocks of the national endeavour suddenly found themselves both literally and metaphorically on the front line, and while they were serving in the war they encountered a certain dignity. And the one thing that is uniformly coming across all these blokes said after the war was, while I was serving I felt the colour of my skin wasn't an issue, but what was interesting was that the moment they got off the boats back into sort of 1920s boomtime Australia, their colour was painted back on.
Captain Cook and many more, you've never seen the lines before. The white man meets us coloured boys now, here in the shit Terry Bay's crown. You see the world turned upside down, see the world turned upside down.
And you get these stories over and over of blokes who come back and they go back to work on the property that they came from, and their own black community starts looking askance at them and saying, "What's happened to you? You've changed. You're not content anymore." And he finds himself drifting away from community or from family, but white society is not welcoming him with open arms either. And so to a certain extent what the First World War did create was a group of black men who were disenfranchised from the white community but also from the black community, had their political consciousness, at least the beginnings of it, raised, but had nowhere to invest it.
You lose a few mates, then they lose a few mates. The whistle blows and we gain another cricket pitch of valley. The horn blows and they chase us out, but most of the time we just sit here and sing our songs, while they sit over there and sing theirs. And everyone hates the whole bloody stunt.
Hey, shush! Don't let the captain hear you carrying on like that.
It's a stalemate, isn't it? Stalemate.
This story is saying, no, we shouldn't kind of limit ourselves. We should look at our whole history in this particular land. So, yes, it is a kind of still nation building. Telling these stories is still nation building. Yeah. It's just maybe not an alternate voice, but a complementary voice to that nation building.
Sometimes the arts has to smash the vessel of history and say, look, the story that you've been telling to your own people is palpably a lie. we can't say in this case that that's what we're doing. We're trying to add to the story as opposed to trying to rewrite it. It's inserting a black narrative into what has hitherto been completely colonised as a white narrative.
You right to go again, guys?
It's a very white perspective to talk about peace and war as if they're sort of easily compartmentalised, but for many black Australians, the experience in 1788 has been one long war and one long process of fighting for land and fighting for country. And so the First World War is a foreign context in a larger narrative of conflict. That's not everybody's story, but it is some's, and if this piece of theatre can get that sort of sense of irony across, then it's doing something provocative.